a person going through life has a lot of ebbs and flows of their life, and they're creating here and they're creating there, and they're doing a little less and whatever. When they understand what they're about, their repertoire of experience and the being able to translate that experience into action is a creative moment. People innately have a potential, and I found that with children early on when I was at summer camps and teaching them music and drama and so forth. An 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and you've seen kids, they're just so imaginative and so on. And then what happens to that? Well, people kind of get crushed on it, or they get dissuaded from this or that, or they stop playing the piano because somebody said they'll never be great or whatever. Creativity can be, kind of suppressed.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Mark Shekter. How are you doing, Mark?
Very well. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you for coming on the show, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. But before we do that, you was just saying before that we had philosophical things in common. And now I'm curious, what are those?
Well, I think when we start out in life, and you know this so well, with your Maverick, theory, we sort of have a plan of action. I grew up in a law family, and it was always going to be lawyers. My father was a lawyer. My mother went to law school. My brother became a lawyer, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and on and on. So it was natural that I would do that. Well, I didn't end up there. So, when we talk about changing direction and finding the truth of ourselves and going against the agreement that, is very common in terms of, a planned future, my future wasn't at all what I expected. And so delightfully so. And I think what we share is when you talk about a maverick and a spirit of risk taking as opposed to risk averse and independent thinking and plotting your own course, changing direction and deciding that this is the truth for you. That's philosophically, I think, where we align, because your whole idea of the maverick leadership and maverick ideology and so on really resonates, because when you think about it, and I've seen, so many people, when they really think about it, could call themselves definitely maverick because they've never gone the straight and narrow. They have done crazy and wonderful things. And I think that makes life wonderful. I mean, people have asked me, how do you handle risk? And I've often said, do you mean, how do I live? What is life? What's so secure?
That is so funny. I am a severe Star Trek fan, and anyone who listens to this podcast long enough will understand with all my Star Trek references. But there's one line that Captain Kirk says when they have to make a decision, which came to mind when you said it, and it was, risk is our business. That is why we're out here. And I thought that is exactly my philosophical viewpoint. It sounds like it's yours as well.
Oh, definitely. I don't think of it as risk until people go, well, how did you manage? And we can get into a bit of background with each of us, but the path that I took when people went, how do you live on that freelance universe? I mean, you don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from. How did you manage that in life? And I go, well, that's living. That's the excitement. It's following that wonderful self-driven purpose. And you don't think about risk in the same way that somebody who is more on the conservative side perhaps thinks about risk. It's not math, So anyway, I think we do have that in common. Certainly you talk it, you share it. And I think so many people, when they really think about it, would relate so well to it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. It's always a little bit of a risk, isn't it, when we open up and share a little bit about ourselves?
Always. And it's very refreshing. And you know this so well when somebody says to you at a dinner party or wherever, so tell me, what are you doing? Not the job, but how do you approach life, and how do you approach relationships, and how do you approach creativity? And and somebody is actually interested, and you think, wow, how refreshing, because we've all been at dinner parties and places and meetings where the conversation is really listening to others, which I love. And at the end of it, and I haven't said a word, they've said, wonderful talking to you, but you haven't said anything. You've just listened very well, which is also wonderful. So, it's very nice to have the opportunity to actually be asked questions. It's refreshing. I have a few of you, for you, of course. But yeah, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. So I'm enjoying this genuinely, the interview, to be able to share some of my thoughts in alignment with, what you're about every day.
Brilliant. Thank you. So tell us a bit more about you. Expand it out a bit for me.
Well, as I said, I was going to be a lawyer, except at the same time, parallel to that, I had a real passion for music, and I was, learning piano and starting to give concerts. And then I started writing songs, and suddenly one of my songs was picked up by a group and performed in television.
Wow.
And I was in early teens, and they said, why don't you come on the show and talk about your music? And I went, I've just started writing songs. But I had a band, that was playing rock and roll in clubs and everything. I play piano. And I said, well, okay, I'll come on this show. And on this show, suddenly there was a TV, and I got the bug, and I went, oh, I like this. This is kind of fun, because I'm talking about art and creativity. And I'd never been asked about that. It was all academic. So that grew, where I started to go to summer camps and was doing music and drama, directing and writing shows in college and so forth. And suddenly I said, it's just a lot of fun. I like this, but I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a lawyer. However, life happened as it happens. And I found myself suddenly getting accepted to law school at the same time that word got out that I had this comic musical sense, and I got hired to do a television show on the date that I was accepted into law school. So that changed. So I went to the head of the television network, and I said, what do I do? I've got a law opportunity and I have a show business opportunity. And he said, well, you should just keep them both alive, because you never know in this business, you see. So I went to law school while I was writing a television show. Law school in the morning, studio in the afternoon. But what happened is that I enjoyed it, and I realized that hobby of mine, playing music, composing, doing folk songs, all that was really a DNA for me. And I said, you know what? I'm going to commit myself to that. So my first sharp right was leaving law school, much to the dismay of my future partners. I was going to be a litigator, you see. We had it all planned out. And I started writing television full time at $100 a week. My parents went, okay, very supportive, but here we go. 2 years later, I was in Hollywood. I got scouted. I rose very quickly, and I ended up in a Hollywood career writing for people like Steve Martin, Ray Charles Music, Elton John, all the greats. Suddenly I'm face to face. I'm a kid, and I'm writing special material music, comedy for these amazing people, and just in my element, loving it, and recognize that, we talk about risk. I had really dedicated myself to the arts and creativity and decided this was my future. So I thought. And there I was at the top of the form. I was touted as one of the top writers in the country. And I could write comedy, I could write music, I could write drama. So, they say in acting a triple threat, dancing and acting and singing. I was, I suppose, a triple threat in the creative arts. But I just loved it. And to me, it was just something I felt it was a gift, and I really wanted to express it. And I rose very quickly. But even so, where I was haunted was I was studying creativity and its effect. I watched the effect of these performers and how they influenced audiences and what message they carried, their impact, their influence when it was positive. And I realized that they had the position and the altitude to create changes. And so I got interested in what makes a hit. What does it that moves somebody to be at the top of their game? And I went to my agent at William Morris, and I said, Elliot, should I write comedy? Should I write this? And he said, just write me a hit. He said, you're the writer. And I said, no, that is the most ridiculous, advice I've ever had. And he said, no, but that is your hat. You're the hit maker. So I thought, well, how do I do this consistently? So I did another Maverick thing. I decided to find out what makes a hit. Anybody in Hollywood would tell you, you're crazy. There's so many variables, the attitude of the artists, the performers, they could have a bad day, the directors, how do you possibly predict? You don't have a crystal ball. I said, there's got to be something there. So I went ahead, despite the, skepticism, and studied successful movies, books, music, because I was in all of those fields. And I reduced it down to 8 points that I thought were common to successes that seemed to be consistent when I applied it to others. And I could examine why something worked and something didn't to a pretty excellent degree. And I started to predict what would happen with an idea. And of course, I applied it to my own writing and producing, because now I was producing in Hollywood. And my success rate, my sales rate was higher than the average. And people came to me and said, what have you done here? And I said, oh, I have this 8-step thing. Well, that was another Maverick shift of viewpoint, because suddenly I'm teaching, instructing high-end directors, producers, writers, and people how to think differently about creativity, their craft, and how to predict a more likelihood of success. And that has become where my career went, where I realized that creativity in leadership, creativity in life, creativity in the arts, in business is the baseline. And people throw that word around a lot. But I came up with my own understanding and definitions. And really, it led me to, I guess, why we're talking now, because to me, when I really looked at it, the creative foundation, the ability, if you look at it this way, any problem remains a problem unless solved through a creative choice or decision. You can trace the lack of success or barriers to success as a bottom line that the people in charge or, trusted to make those choices weren't able to draw on enough innate creativity, and I do believe it's absolutely innate, or couldn't ignite it enough that they could solve the problem. And no one would argue that. I went into boardrooms because my work moved from the creative arts into creative business, sort of the art of business, if you like. And that really became my path and is my path now. I continue in the arts, which I can talk about in a second, but it really changed my direction. But, as you know so well, Judith, it's really kind of where I was going all along. And all of that earlier understanding, the law studies, the pattern that we follow, when I think Steve Jobs said it beautifully, you start to join the dots. And the dots suddenly added up to, this is my purpose. And if I can bring an understanding to help others through a different way of thinking, a new think, if you like, then I've done something worthwhile. And that became is the passion on a daily basis. So there's kind of a little synopsis for you of an entry point of this conversation, but that's kind of tracing a bit of this crazy Maverick viewpoint that I have, this risk averse or risk positive state of mind that I live in all the time.
You know what? That's absolutely fascinating. I could just sit here and just listen and just keep listening. I'm just smiling as you go through explaining it all. Let's listen to a quick advert.
The Maverick Paradox. Judith Germain is an author, speaker, consultant, mentor, and trainer, and the leading authority on Maverick leadership. She is the founder of the Maverick Paradox, which supports organizations to enhance their leadership capabilities and to help business owners develop and grow their businesses. Judith enables individuals, business owners, and organizations to improve their impact and influence. She is also HR Zone's leadership columnist, and her expert opinion has appeared in national, international, and trade press.
Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. So if we take all of that, and it's a great way to come to a kind of professional purpose, how does one, I don't know, discover or unlock even their own creative potential in the professional sphere? Because a lot of organizations seem to feel that real creativity sits in an R&D department, and it would be, and when you're trying to say, if I'm training or mentoring people, like for example, I said the other day I was training and I said, oh, you know, as leaders, you of course schedule time in your diary each week so that you do strategic thinking, right? And everybody laughed, and I was like, okay, one of the things you might want to do is, and it's that kind of, and creativity is the same way. If you're completely busy, there is no space to be creative. So how can leaders unlock their potential for creativity?
A great question. Well, Think 8, that's what I call the process. It's a trademark process of these 8 steps.
Mm-hmm.
What I found and where the breakthrough was for me on the subject of creativity was, and it was sitting there all along, when one understands truly what they're about, call it a calling or a vocation, your destiny, what you're meant to do, your divine purpose, whatever that might be. When you hit that moment, the fascinating thing is that your creative juices turn on. It's something to actually experience, to understand. A person going through life has a lot of ebbs and flows of their life, and they're creating here and they're creating there, and they're doing a little less and whatever. When they understand what they're about, their repertoire of experience and being able to translate that experience into action is a creative moment. People innately have a potential, and I found that with children early on when I was at summer camps and teaching them music and drama and so forth. An 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and you've seen kids, they're just so imaginative and so on. And then what happens to that? Well, you know, people kind of get crushed on it, or they get dissuaded from this or that, or they stop playing the piano because somebody said they'll never be great or whatever. Creativity can be, you know, kind of suppressed. I found that it's not a genetic thing in my experience, because we deal with people, executives, leaders all around the world. Our company, Think 8 Global Institute, is a global facing design firm that works with startups and multinationals and Fortune 500s and the entertainment industry. And the common denominator is getting an individual, regardless of their position within a company or an organization, which follows naturally, to unlock their creative potential to solve problems. And how do we do that? We get them, first of all, to tap into, identify, and we have a process for this, what they're meant to do. By that, I mean, what is it that they innately feel is their gift to the world, their true value? You know, we talk about a value proposition in business, and that's factual, but it starts with the individual. And the work we do when we come into companies or we work with people, because some says, well, you're starting with the why? No, you're starting with the what or the how? No, we start with the who. And our first address is to help somebody through a process that we have tap into, discover or rediscover the innate purpose that's sitting there. And when that explodes and you know those moments, Judith, you must have had it. I can imagine over and over again, look what you're doing. And every day you're sitting there, and the way you talk and the way you're interviewed and the way you express yourself to others, you're on fire all the time. Well, that energy, and if somebody goes, and I remember one of the interviews you had, you were being interviewed by your gentleman you were sharing that radio program with, and he was saying, you know, you're just on fire. You started your radio thing, you got your magazine, you got your this. And they're going, you're so prolific. Well, of course, people are, if they allow themselves to. So what is that permission? tap into that purposefulness. And it's not just an overused word, it's a real thing. And I don't mean I'm a doctor who makes people better. I'm talking a doctor when you find their purpose saying, I am all about preventive medicine. And suddenly it explodes. They're not simply surgeon. They're simply saying, how do I heal people? If I can heal them early, they don't have to come on the operating table. There's a purpose. You come into if you look at some of these major companies and the people who led them, there's a driving thing behind them personally that they bring to the group. Well, that's part one of the creative process. And a leader who is unfettered, unsuppressed, acknowledging that it's there, then the question is, how do we bring it out? And that's the work that we do and the work, obviously, that you do. And when they tap into that, that's part one. They are purposeful. They're living it true. And the interesting thing is their risk element starts to dissolve. I had a lunch with Leonard Cohen. You're familiar with the poet singer?
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking for somebody to write his first television show, and he was interviewing people. And he interviewed me. He said, I heard about you. I want to talk to you. And we were sitting there at a deli in Montreal over a smoked meat sandwich. He likes to point out it's not corned beef, it's smoked meat. He was very specific about that. And he said, and I said to him, Leonard, I said, he was asking me about my television background. I did get the job, and it was very successful television program. And he said to me, tell me about yourself. He said, Leonard, I think you got it backwards. Let me ask you a question. How did you, growing up as a poet, figure that you could make a living? I mean, how did you make that choice? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I had no choice. That's what I'm talking about. When you hit that, and I've hit it, and you've hit it, it just pulls you. It just pulls you. And you look around and you evaluate things in light of that, and your creative juices start flowing because that's what you're about. And you're drawing your experience, you're drawing relationships and people and information and studies and everything. It coalesces and it's focused. And all of that knowledge, the experience you've lived, the insights you've had are now focused because it's directed towards a meaningful conclusion. And it's magical. It truly is magical. And when companies or individuals we work with hit that moment, it's tangible. People talk about an aha moment. It's that on steroids because they're going, oh, and the considerations and the conservatism, you want to release the Maverick in you? There you go. You hit that. But that's part one. I'll get to part two in a second. But the point is, leaders, industry people, executives, entrepreneurs, artists, it's there. That creativity is there, and it's so provable. And it's not genetic, and it isn't a question of they have it, I don't. Talk to most people, and they figure, well, I'm not creative. I outsource it to a consultant or a creative individual. I'm not that person. And yet when they do the right work with us or others, and suddenly they realize, my goodness, they're more than creative. They're magical. That's step one. And this part two is, now how do you create the way forward with that new understanding?
Brilliant. I think that's it just made me think about me. It took my good friend and colleague David Chislett to point out that I was creative, because I think he was getting annoyed with me, keep saying I wasn't creative, and he was saying, what on earth are you talking about? You're creating like every second of the day. And I think it's because of language. I always saw creativity as, music or painting and all that sort of stuff. And I think maybe it all strives back to being in school, where you're either academic or creative, as if there's there's a binary. You're this or that. And the shame, I guess you would know, I guess, is that when I was younger, I was super artistic, but was pushed into the academic track. So therefore you can then not, you didn't have the opportunity to be an artist at school because you had to choose, or it was chosen for you.
It happens so often. And yet when they get into business, I think my epiphany coming from the Hollywood and the arts was how creative business is.
It has to be, isn't it? You can't survive. You can't survive without it, can you?
No. And there's this, you talk about a binary, there was business and I went, oh yeah, corporations. Mm-hmm. And the arts, you see, I'm business. Mm-hmm. And then I got to know people in business and what they did and how they did it and the thought process and everything was a revelation for me. I was naive about it because it was always that those people in those corporations or those business or running a restaurant, what's, nice that they're doing it and the food's good. I didn't realize or appreciate until later how extraordinary they are, what the chef is doing, the magic around the kitchen, etc. And so my work then became dedicated, as yours clearly is, to help people understand, ignite their creative potential and apply it. And the application of it was the part 2 of the work that we do, where it's not enough, it's a lot to have the purpose, but then what's the blueprint for going forward? And because we talk in universities, we lecture, we, whatever, even it's interesting, one of my books was released a few months ago and I was very fortunate. It went to number 1 in 4 categories. And that was interesting because it crossed business, creativity, entrepreneurship, and self-help. And it hit those 4 categories at the same time. And I thought that was fascinating because it was number 1 on Amazon. And I went, what is interesting about it is it does bridge those things because it's not exclusive or applied to one area. Thinkate is a way of thinking. You have a way of thinking. And I had to redefine creativity, and you'll love it because you live this every day. When people go, well, you were there and you wrote for so-and-so and all that, stuff. And I went, no, seriously. They said, how do you find creativity? And I went, well, honestly, creativity, in my understanding, is an idea fully executed. And they go, what? And I go,
I like that. An idea fully executed. I'm writing that down, Mark.
Yeah. And they went, and I said, and this comes from my Hollywood thing because ideas abound. I've been into taxis and people have pitched me operas, screenplays, classic, right? You're in Vegas, you're there for meetings, and the taxi driver is a frustrated this. There was even, you'll love this, Judith, you'll just love it. Classic, and you run into these things. A family member of mine was having set up in Stanford University, a very serious heart operation. And I wanted the best surgeon, obviously, and the best anesthesiologist. You'll learn that that's an important person too. And I was told by the cardiologist, and one of the top university medical centers in the world. And the head guy said, I'm sorry, so-and-so can't make it. But his intern, his resident, or whatever, is really very good. I said, no, I don't want to be fussy, but we get talking. He said, what do you do? We get to know each other because this is all preparation for the, setting up all of this. And then at the middle of it, he said, oh, so you're a screenwriter and everything. And he said, well, that anesthesiologist that you were talking about, he has a screenplay. Would you have the time to read it? And I said, if he does the operation. He said, a deal. So I got the guy. I got the best. Now, I mean, that's the strangest trade, but it proves the point. People have this thing. So an idea executed, ideas abound. The genius is getting it done. You can have an idea when you decided, Judith, to do your magazine or the podcast or the radio thing or those moments. The thing that is unique about you and why you have the following you have is that you actually get the thing done. You do it. You actually do it. So to me, it's not that ideas don't have value, but they sit there. And when you go into boardrooms or you're sitting in these brainstorming sessions and all these ideas are floating around and I'm sitting there going, gentlemen, women, there's no anchor here. And then they call us in and we shape a solution we call a dynamic blueprint, bringing all of these factors together through our process. And there's the purpose and the blueprints and the way forward, and they execute it. That's the home run. Talking, plans. You'll love this also. They say, well, what's your definition of strategy, Mark? Because we're a strategic design firm. And I said, what's yours? They said, well, beautifully presented thing with all the things considered and all the variables. And and they go, well, what's yours, Mark? I said, a plan will work.
Yeah, get it done.
And they go, well, how can you be so sure? I said, you don't have your plan yet. Anyway, that you talk about Maverick and risk, they stand there and their heads kind of wobble because they don't normally get talked to like that.
Yeah.
Like a plan, will work. And then they kind of look at their own plan and they go, it's beautifully wrapped, but I don't know, do you think I don't know, we have questions. I don't know. We should go back to the drawing board. Well, that's the creative thing, that the bar is high, but it's a beautiful bar.
It's interesting. I never thought of creativity in that way before. I mean, one of the things why I get hired is because I'm known for execution, that things get done because people want to get it done. So, my thing is, even if I'm training or mentoring or whatever, a common thing that I will say is, what is it that you're going to do right now that you can do tomorrow? The thing, and I'd hold people to account. It's like, so what are you going to do? That's brilliant, but what are you going to do differently tomorrow or after this session if we're mentoring? Because if you don't intend to execute, you're just wasting everybody's time.
Oh, absolutely. And let me ask you, obviously you're alive with creativity. How would you describe your driving purpose, if I may ask you? What is it that, if you had to distill it down to a concise statement, what is it that moves you?
Creating clear thinking and decisive leaders. And for me, decisive isn't just about making a decision. I'm an acronym hound as well. So for me, decisive leaders are driven ones. So they have the right level of determination. They consider reputation, and reputation looking at, the character, the person, their integrity, as well as their ability to get the thing done and the competence, influence, versatility, execution, and narration. And the clear thinking comes around. I believe that real leaders are ones that respond to things, not react to things. So for me, reaction tends to be emotional and without real thought. And when you respond, you're objectively looking at things from all angles. Doesn't mean that there's no emotion. So it's not like saying you're in an emotionless state, but all that the emotion isn't driving you. But what you aren't doing is immediately making an emotional statement. So I don't know. Did that answer your question, or did I just waffle? I'm not sure now.
No, not at all. No, beautifully so. I mean, obviously the intent is to provide an opportunity for people to really win and to achieve, in their field, to make it possible for themselves. Our purpose at Think 8 is to enable those who enable others. And really allowing them, sounds very, very similar in the sense of we're both dedicated to that, and the tools that we develop and use are directed towards that end. And it's such a satisfying thing to see that happen. And that creativity core is really, for us, just one way of expressing what happens and what should happen when somebody really touches what they're meant to do. And they make choices off that are quite astounding. We have watched the Maverick in people, if you like, the explosion of, or shift of direction, the explosion of energy, health, well-being, well, monetary return, all these things, because they're doing what they love. I remember somebody who said to me, I love what you do. I just, and they haven't done it yet. And then afterwards they changed their mind, but they thought, I don't know if I have I don't think I have the luxury of loving what I do every day.
Oh, wow. That's really sad.
And I went, the luxury? How about the necessity?
Essential.
The essential. And so the 8-step program, that's why it's called Think 8, because it's these 8 points, takes a person through that purposefulness, through a whole understanding of who they are, what they're about, what that value, their deep value proposition might be, then how to express it, how to structure it, and the ultimate impact, the influence, the consequence of their actions, so that they see all of it, present and future, and they know where they're going and why. And you get that all together, that whole process ignites not only their interest in life and living and so on, but their effectiveness in bringing about certainly their dreams, but also if they're in a company, helping those they're working with, form a meaningful culture and, business, whatever it be, in the arts and business and career. And you see that happen, and you know that so well. It's so rewarding. And so, in my life and in yours as well, starting over here and then the lawyer and then the creative arts and then the business, I wake up often and I go, how did I get here when I started there? And then I realized, well, I was doing this all along.
You planned it. That's how you got there, Mark. You planned it.
I planned it, but it was innate. It was sitting there to draw on it. When I finally listened to it and had the courage, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To go and go, you know what? Personal integrity, important. To go, I really have to honor this, even though it's $100 a week and I've left a guaranteed job as a lawyer. And I went, no, I'm going to go for it. $100, barely paid rent. And I went, no, this is it. This is it. And somebody said, what are you doing? Are you sure? And you can always come back to, said, no, this is, well, it takes some courage, but you're just listening to yourself and you're honoring that and you live it. And then that's where the real magic happens, Anyway, all of this, God, we could go on forever with philosophy and so on, but the result is that people can get things done, can live well, purposefully, and that there's no better gift to yourself than those around you. I can't think of anything. If you know what you're about and what you can give to others, however you get there, by whatever means, practices, faith, spirituality, all the power to you. Everyone around you is the winner,
That sounds absolutely perfect. I think you've earned the right, Mark, to plug your book.
You're very kind. It's called Think 8, 8 Steps to Ignite Your Creative Genius in Business, Career, and Life. And it's available on Amazon, on the Kindle version and the paperback. And it's enjoying, I'm very grateful, wonderful success. Being adopted. And it's one of those things, again, where like you are with your podcast and your magazines, the written word, you can talk it and so on. But, for years, somebody said, can you put it down? Can you put it down? And you want enough proof of concept, I guess you would say. And then I wrote it different ways and so forth. And I had my wife, who's the co-founder of our company, Think 8 Global, Nancy Trites-Botkin, also a very credited Emmy-winning, like I am, writer, producer, director. And I would write it, and this is the value of a partnership, where she said, not your voice. Love the content, not your voice. I went, what do you mean not my voice? This is me. So, no. So after 7 drafts, you get
That's
it
way
right.
more than I did, Mark, on my book.
Well, I learned writing, as they say in Hollywood, is rewriting. But it became more personal. It's full of anecdotes, Hollywood stories, the whole development of the Think 8 system, how it started with actors and celebrities and people, stories, my journey. and then it gets into the tool and the case studies. And so it's a whole kind of an arc of starting from the beginnings through to its adoption universally and increasingly. So yes, I mean, I think it's helpful and it's being used increasingly. So if people have an interest in checking it out, it's Think8, and there it is. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I appreciate that. But you know it so well, Judith, you have stuff online. If you know it has value, you want to get people to at least take the opportunity to listen and decide for themselves if it's useful. And you've got so many channels for people to access, which what you think about. So the book is one channel for me to help others access, other than the personal, interaction. So we love what we do, I mean, isn't that the gift of it all?
It is indeed. And thank you for your kind comments. I think I ought to say about my book, just to say that it's called The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. Mark, I have enjoyed you coming on the show so much. You are definitely coming back again, even if you don't want to.
I would love to. I'm a big UK fan, by the way. I know you're over there, and I'm in Montreal, so we have that French thing going on here as well. But I must truly and genuinely, Judith, thank you for the work you do. It's so important. I deeply feel that people should have every opportunity, and you know that too. And if we can help, I mean, sincerely and genuinely, where people can realize what they're meant to do, first of them, help them understand what they're meant to do, and then do it. I don't think there's a better gift that we can give. And we're very dedicated, both of us, to it. And the work you do is to be applauded. It's a lot of work. I think if anybody thinks you just step up to a microphone and do it, you know this. And it just, nothing to it, pick up in the morning and just, off the top of your head. There's a lot more work behind it. But it comes across as effortless. So you, in your interviews, and I've listened to many, are effortless. You obviously love this. So, continue the good work. Continue the good work. And I'd love to come back. I'm enjoying this tremendously. It's wonderful.
Brilliant. That is definitely something we should schedule it in then. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you out there for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast, where through conversations with our guests, just like Mark, we demonstrate that Maverick leadership exists everywhere. I'm Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to Mark and I have a great conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.